gonna have a little place.
Oh, we gonna have a little place?
We're gonna have a cow, and pig, and some chickens. And then down on the flat, we're gonna have a field of alfalfa.
For the rabbits. And I get to tend the rabbits.
Hello and welcome to Nan Tan Lupan at the Drive-In. I'm starting a new line today based on Burgess Meredith in From Harm's Way, 1965. Today's movie is Of Mice and Men, 1939. The original story was written by John Steinbeck and was set during the Great Depression. One of the interesting things about this movie is that it was not carried by a major star. Many of the actors had fine and long careers, but they were not the blockbuster leading types. The title of the movie comes from a Robert Burns poem titled To a Mouse, and states, "The best laid schemes o' mice und men gang af agly," or as translated, "The best laid schemes of mice and men often go awry." The Great Depression kicked off in the United States on October 29, 1929, when the stock market crashed and is now known as Black Tuesday. I can't remember the name of the play, but one line states that, quote, "He was part of a gentle rain of stockbrokers that fell to the earth that fall," unquote. Of course, that refers to a time when stockbrokers would often commit suicide when they lost all of their clients' money, rather than flee to the Caymans with stacks of stolen loot as they do now. As a result of the Depression, 1 in every 4 people were thrown out of work. Able-bodied men with no ties to hold them roamed the country looking for work, government relief, something to eat, or something to steal. Steinbeck wrote about these people in this story and the mass migration of Okies to California in The Grapes of Wrath, 1940. The director of Mice and Men, Lewis Milestone, was a real heavy hitter. Born in the Soviet Republic, he immigrated to the USA as a teenager. During World War I, he served in the Army as an assistant director for training films. Following the war, he worked his way up through the film business until he directed 7 Sinners in 1925 for Howard Hughes. In 1930, he had his first big hit with All's Quiet on the Western Front. A few of his directorial achievements other than this film include a series of war films such as Edge of Darkness, 1943, The Purple Heart, 1944, A Walk in the Sun, 1946, and Pork Chop Hill, 1959. I highly recommend Pork Chop Hill, a film about duty, courage, and being left out to dry. Gregory Peck is great in this movie. In 1960, Milestone directed Frank Sinatra and the Rest of the Rat Pack in Ocean's 11, and at least the third best Mutiny on the Bounty in 1962. Marlon Brando played a strutting peacock of Fletcher Christian in this version. Milestone started PT-109 in 1963, but walked away from the unfinished film. While I consider Burgess Meredith to be the biggest star in this movie, I'm going to talk about Lon Chaney Jr. first because I want to consider the names of the characters they played. Lon Chaney Jr., who received third billing in this movie, is the son of legendary silent star Lon Chaney Sr., who was known as the Man of 1,000 Faces for his ability to apply makeup to himself long before this became a separate art form. In this film, Jr. played Lennie Small, a mentally handicapped giant with an affinity for soft things and no understanding of his own strength. I like the juxtapositioning of small for large in the vein of Luke Skywalker and Dorothy Gale. Of course, Luke and Dorothy are the same character, but that's a story for later. Chaney, who stood 6'2", wore 6-inch heels in this movie to make him seem larger. He felt later that this stereotyped him into the monster roles he would receive after this. The second major character in this movie is Burgess Meredith, who played George Milton. Is that a powerful name related to government and business? I may be reaching. Meredith was a character actor that had a long and varied career. The older crowd knows him as the Penguin from the Batman television shows. A slightly younger crowd will remember him as Mick in the Rocky series.
And Woodrock! This guy'll kill you to death inside of 3 rounds!
However, I will remember him from this movie and a light little comedy called Foul Play in 1978, where he was cast with Goldie Hawn and Chevy Chase. A lot of major stars wanted the lead role, but these 2 relatively unknowns were cast. Chaney got the role over Broderick Crawford. because he worked his way into the casting process, reading Lennie's lines with other actors until he was accepted. Crawford had had the role on stage, and I have tried to place him in the role. I just can't do it. It's like those posters that show Tom Selleck as Indiana Jones before they chose Harrison Ford for the role. I just can't see it. Bob Steele played the role of Curly, the son of the ranch boss. He had a short man's complex and hated anyone who was stronger or taller than him. He also had a bored wife named May. Steele had a 60-year-long movie career that spanned from the silent era to the mid-1970s. He was never a big star, but he made a living as a cowboy actor. He was only in 4 big hits: this movie, The Enforcer, 1951, The Big Sleep, 1946, and Hang 'em High, 1968. In between, he played many smaller roles, including uncredited parts. Curly's wife, May, was played by Betty Field. Who? That's what I said. The only role I even remember her from is the woman who wanted to marry the Birdman while he was in prison in The Birdman of Alcatraz, 1962. I barely remember her in this role. Roman Bohannon played the part of Candy, a one-handed, old farm hand that was looking for greener pastures to spend his last days in. Bohannon had a couple of scores of movie credits. He had a small but important role in The Best Years of Our Life, 1946, and he was also in The Song of Bernadette, 1943. In the role of Slim was Charles Bickford. Slim is a kind of intelligent and intuitive mule skinner. Now that doesn't mean he skins mules. A mule skinner drives a team of mules. Bickford started on the track to become a leading man, but he was mauled by a lion during the filming of East of Java in 1935, and he spent the rest of his career as a character actor. Apparently, he was somewhat of a hellion and was constantly fighting with the studio and directors. Lee Whippers played the role of Crooks. Crooks was a stable hand and lived separately from the other hands due to his race. His name was a derogatory slur given to him meaning black steel. Whipper was born in South Carolina during Reconstruction and went to Howard University, where he received a law degree. Whipper was the first African American to join the Actors Equity Association. He was also one of the founders of the Negro Actors Guild of America. During World War II, Whipper was a member of the steering committee for the Negro divisions of the Hollywood Victory Committee. The final actor that I will mention is uncredited in this movie and played an old hand. The only reason I mention this rodeo trick rider is because of his name, Silvertip Baker. You just can't beat a name like that. The story begins with George Milton, Burgess Meredith, and Lennie Small, Lon Chaney Jr., running from a mob to catch a train. It's the height of the Depression, and they are just some of the men on the move looking for work and trying to stay out of trouble. That first night they spend by the river, and we begin to see the bond between the men. George is smart and is the leader. Lennie is large and strong, but he is limited mentally. George tells the story of the small farm they plan to buy, and he also tells Lennie to come back to this spot by the river if there's any trouble. The pair get a job at a ranch where they meet the boss's vertically challenged son, Curly, played by Bob Steele. Curly has an overblown Napoleon complex and immediately takes a dislike to Lennie. To make matters worse, Curly has a bored young wife named May, who he is overprotective of and hateful to. He is also extremely jealous of anyone she gives attention to. The mule skinner, Slim, played by Charles Bickford, has a mangy old dog that has just had pups. He gives one to Lennie, knowing he likes soft things. When Candy, played by Roman Bohannon, finds out about the dream farm, he asks to throw in with the duo, and for a short time it seems their dreams may come true. But it's not long until Curly attacks Lennie. Lennie grabs Curly's fist and crushes his hand, ending the fight. I've tried this many times, but it just doesn't work like in the movies. George lets down his guard and goes to town with the crew, leaving Lennie alone. Lennie visits Crooks, the black stable hand. Crooks also asks to join the dream farm. Curly's wife comes in and starts flirting with the men, then turns mean and threatens to have the black man lynched. Later, Lennie is petting his pup and kills it because he doesn't know his own strength. May shows up and opens up to Lennie about her dreams while Lennie rambles on about the dream farm. They really are in two separate worlds. Then May comes up with the brilliant idea to let him stroke her hair because he likes soft things. She already knows about the puppy, so come on. Of course, Lennie goes to work on her hair like the Yeti in a Bugs Bunny cartoon, and May begins to scream. Lennie gently tries to quiet her and snaps her neck. Lennie runs to the rendezvous point while the hands begin to form a mob. George gets a gun and beats the mob to where Lennie is waiting. George has Lennie look out over the river and tells him the story of the dream farm and talks about the rabbit. He slowly pulls the gun and kills Lennie while he is happy, rather than letting him be killed or thrown in jail. When the mob arrives, only Slim realizes what has happened, as George is led away by the sheriff. Steinbeck said the story is based on a pitchfork murder that he saw while working the fields. He also said that May was only added as a foil for Lennie, and that is why she is mostly called Curly's wife. This movie was nominated for 4 Oscars, including Best Picture, but did not win any. And a side note, every time Charles Bickford, who played Slim, was nominated for Best Supporting Actor, his co-star won the Best Actress award. This happened 3 times. This movie has a lot of depth that I didn't really get into. It's a study on how men bond and separate themselves by their actions. It is also a commentary on the mistreatment of people who are different than others. But I think the most important point of this movie is that you have to carry your own dreams. If you try to carry the dreams of others, the weight will be too much and will crush you both. This movie was remade in 1992 with Gary Sinise as George and John Malkovich as Lennie. They are both fine actors, but I could never take Malkovich as being the giant with crushing strength. The book of Mice and Men is commonly placed on the banned list for schools by narrow-minded bigots that don't have the gray matter to understand what's going on in the text. The summary for this movie is very hard. As it is such a fine and important film, it's hard to reduce it to a short summary, but I think I got it. Summary. 2 itinerant workers take work at a California ranch run by a psychotic runt and his wife who is prone to make bad choices. Things end badly for the workers.